Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I had another video all queued up for this morning about Dojo, so definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to see that. It's very, very geeky. I love doing it, but things happen in the Tesla world, and so you have to sort of adjust as you go. So what I want to talk about is the press release that is hot off the press right now, Tesla's second quarter 2025 production and deliveries and deployments. So here we have Texas, July 2nd, 2025. In the second quarter, we produced over 410,000 vehicles, delivered over 384,000 vehicles, and deployed 9.6 gigawatt hours of energy storage products. We can see a breakdown. And then, of course, Tesla will post its financial results for the second quarter after market close on Wednesday, July 23rd. So this is all fairly standard stuff. So let's look at this real quick here. We have a total of 410,244 vehicles produced for quarter two, which would be April, May, June of 2025. We have 384,122 deliveries. If we break that down, the Model 3 and Y production is 396,835, deliveries of 373,728. Other models, which are the S, the X, and the Cybertruck, which is production of 13,409 and deliveries of 10,394. So the obvious thing we need to do is compare this to quarter two of 2024. So let's take a look at that. They have 9.4 gigawatt hours of energy, and I believe it was 9.6. Yeah, so they actually improved on that metric, so that's good. But if we look over here, we can see that they had produced 410,831 vehicles and delivered 443,956. So a huge, huge difference, especially in deliveries. So that's 410,000 versus 410,000 produced for the two, but the deliveries were 384,000, and last year it was 443,000. Also note that last year, while we were ramping up the Cybertruck, the other models production was 24,255 with deliveries of 21,551. And this year, that is, basically half, not quite. Deliveries are actually less than half this year. So that is a huge, huge fall in terms of those specialty products, especially the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck, obviously, this year with the political things that were going on, was a significant, it took a significant hit, obviously. It was sort of the poster child of everybody that didn't like Elon for whatever reason and didn't like Tesla for whatever reason. So the other vehicles, especially the 3 and the Y, escaped that a little bit, but not entirely, as we can see here. But the Cybertruck in particular took a gigantic hit. So going from 2024 when things were looking pretty good, you could guesstimate that it was probably 15 or 17,000 Cybertrucks were being produced, and a little bit less than that sold last April, May, June. This April, May, June, you're looking at maybe 8 or 9,000 Cybertrucks produced and maybe 7,000 delivered. So that is a huge degradation of that particular model. And it's really a shame because this should be when it's ramping up, right? We should have actually had something like 3 or 4 times that number delivered this year if you were having a proper ramp up. So this other models is the really, really gigantic hit, that it should have been somewhere on the order of 40,000 production and deliveries, somewhere like that. It should have been like 4x what we're seeing here. So that's pretty devastating on the Cybertruck front. It means that we might end up with a Pontiac Aztec Cybertruck. We might end up with a Cybertruck that is just not. They just eventually decide not to produce it anymore because there's no demand for it. And I think that's a shame, because I think that under the right circumstances, it is by far the best car that I've ever driven, as I say, and it's not even a car. But the problem with it is that it just became too much of a political lightning rod at just the wrong time. If it had happened a year later, or if Tesla had had the political stuff happening a year earlier, it probably wouldn't have been affected by it that much. But just the fact that it happened in 2024 when the Cybertruck was supposed to be ramping was pretty devastating to it. Now, as far as the Model 3 and Y, the production 396 in 2025 and 386 in 2024. So they actually produced more Model 3s and Ys. But if you look at the deliveries, they had 422,000. So they far outstripped the amount of production last year, which was great. It meant that they, were actually producing fewer than they could even deliver. So they delivered a lot. This year, you look at 396 compared to 373. So you have about a 23,000 vehicle drop from the number of production to deliveries. And even worse than that, from last year, you're looking at about 50,000 vehicles fewer delivered in 2025 quarter two than 2024 quarter two. So those are pretty brutal numbers. And of course, there have been many Tesla apologists who said that they thought that this was not going to be an issue starting in quarter two. At the end of quarter one, when I saw the quarter one results, and I did that video, and you can catch that up here if you're interested in seeing that. When I did a review of those production and deliveries, I said we're going to have to wait for quarter two because that's when we're really going to see the effects. There was an excuse with the Model Y that the new Juniper Model Y had just come out, and that therefore there was a slowdown in production, and so deliveries couldn't happen as much. People were waiting on that. I personally thought that there were more issues with Tesla than people were giving credence to, and I think it's borne out here in quarter two. It's pretty bad numbers. Tesla was a growth story for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden they're not anymore. So how do you justify the stock value? How do you justify looking at the future of Tesla? This is a very big concern. Now, on the other hand of things, we just had the robotaxi rollout in Austin, and we just had the first car deliver itself to a customer's house 2 days early. In fact, I think it was supposed to be the 28th, and it happened on the 26th of June. So those are huge milestones that Elon and Tesla on the 23rd, when they do the financial results Q&A and all of that kind of stuff, are going to talk a lot about that and a lot about the future and about how it doesn't matter as much how many cars they deliver and stuff. But in the short term, you really do have to worry about deliveries. It's like you have to keep feeding the beast. You have to keep making money on what you're doing right now in order to enable the future. I know that Tesla's in the enviable situation of actually having some extra cash on hand, which most automobile companies do not have, but they will burn through that eventually if they don't get their deliveries back up as quickly as possible. And that's going to take brand rehabilitation. I just don't think there's any other way to look at it aside from having to do brand rehabilitation. Now, is that going to require a PR department like traditional companies would use? I have a feeling that Tesla is kind of anti that, or at least Elon is. But I think that it might be at least worth researching that at this point. A marketing PR, even if it's a skunk works kind of thing, I think that Tesla, it would behoove them to look into doing some brand reputation fixing, right? They need a fixer out there to make this all work better. Because unfortunately, in the United States, and even more so in Europe and somewhat in China, we're looking at Tesla becoming somewhat of a pariah. They were an aspirational brand that everybody wanted to be, and everybody wanted to own a Tesla. At least many people wanted to own a Tesla, not everybody, but the people who did, it was an aspirational brand. Even if you couldn't afford it yet, you're like, someday I will make the money and I'll be able to afford it. Will Tesla release a less expensive vehicle to try to make up for these numbers? I don't know, because it sounds like they had one in the works, but that Elon specifically rejected that vehicle and didn't want to put it out. He wanted to put out the Cybercab instead, which is fine, except that we're looking at a couple of years before the robotaxi and cybercab are going to become a serious player, because it's just going to take time for the vehicles to get vetted in different localities, to be able to roll out to those localities, to start to make money in those localities. It's a couple of years solidly. So we're probably looking at the middle of 2027 before robotaxi and cybercab really start to drive the economic needle of Tesla, which means that in the meantime, they have 2 more years of needing to sell their cars. And the sentiment now is that there are other electric vehicles that are just as good. In the United States, there's a big shift in sentiment away from electric vehicles, which I think is very, very unfortunate. But even in the rest of the world, where EVs are going gangbusters and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, specifically China and Europe, those markets, people are turning away from Tesla and buying other EVs, which again, I think is unfortunate, because I still think that Tesla is the best EV on the market, but others are catching up, and people, have their issues with Tesla at this point and are purchasing other vehicles. And that is customer lock-in. If you buy an EV, you're probably not going to be looking at another car for 3 to 5 years. And even when you do, if you had a good experience with a Hyundai or something, you're going to be like, yeah, I'll buy another Hyundai or another Ford or something. So that is unfortunate. Alrighty, so as expected, the news is not fantastic, especially on the deliveries of the Model 3 and Y, and especially about Cybertrucks. Even though those are not broken out specifically, it's obvious that the numbers are going down instead of up, and that is very, very unfortunate. I really think the Cybertruck is one of the best vehicles ever made, and it could just be strangled. It might never achieve the kind of sales that it deserves because of the unfortunate headwinds that it had just as it was coming out. Alrighty, folks, am I being too pessimistic, or maybe not even pessimistic enough? Let me know in the comments. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it helps other people to find it. And if you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. In the meantime, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.